Welcome back to Zoom Tennis and also Prime Your Day, Prime Your Life. Today it's a really important issue. It's around well-being of our employees. And I am delighted today to have a specialist in this area. It's Sarah Jane Butler, who is the CEO and founder of Your Employee Wellbeing. So Sarah Jane, nice to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am also very, very well. Thank you very much. Yes. So let's get straight into the depth of the questions here, because that's what people need to know about how do we really look after our employees. So first question, Sarah Jane, why is employee well-being so important to organizations, both big and small?
Cool. So well-being clearly at the moment is something that is vitally important for everybody. I mean, I think we've all throughout the past year suffered one way or another, whether it's emotionally, financially, socially, or physically. So if our well-being is not balanced across those four pillars, then we are not actually able to function at our optimum level. And for an employee, that is really important, because if they are worrying or they're suffering mentally, or they are concerned about their family, or they are concerned about their health, or similarly concerned about their finances, then they are not concentrating on their work. And somebody may be present in an office or present on the end of a Zoom call, but they're not concentrating. If their mind is not set on the job because they are worrying about homeschooling or they're worrying about their elderly relatives, then they are not actually focusing on their job. And that means that their performance will suffer. So well-being is really the foundation of sustainable high performance. And at the moment, because the boundaries between home and work have been so blurred, we risk stress, we risk burnout as people basically do not know when to stop working. And so they are overworking, but overworking is not a good sign. So well-being for all companies right now is really important, whether you're big or small, because you really have to look after the well-being of your employees if you're going to come out of lockdown with the productivity and the performance levels that you would otherwise hope for.
Absolutely. And I think it seems to have really ebbed and flowed, hasn't it? Particularly, I think when we came back from Christmas and New Year, that decision to suddenly get everybody homeschooling again, it seemed more brutal than any other lockdown news that we got. Sarah Jane, would that reflect with what your clients are telling you?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, everyone knows that January is one of the most depressing months of the year, but I think, coming off the back of everyone being in lockdown, it being cold, it being dark and miserable. Last year when we went into lockdown, it was okay because the weather was nice and it was sunny, and it was a change. The ability to have flexible working, worked well for people. And at that time, it was a kind of it was new. It was not, I wouldn't say exciting, but it was a something that was a bit different. Whereas this time round, everyone knew that, the odds were clearly stacked against us. And if we didn't actually, stay at home, stay inside, then, we were in danger ourselves, as were our families around us. But I think that that enforced imprisonment, in effect, was really difficult for people, mentally. For many people, it's been very difficult financially as well. Many people have been at risk of losing their jobs. Many people have suffered because they've been on furlough. I think the reality is that we have all suffered in this, children and adults alike. And I think for those people who are running businesses, it's been incredibly tough. I mean, leaders have had a huge amount of pressure on them. Managers have had a huge amount of pressure on them. And the ability to manage somebody online is really difficult because they're not in the office. They're not there face to face. And so leaders have taken on a big pressure, a big amount of stress on their lives. And for example, we often say that, you wouldn't trust a doctor who hadn't been at university and done all the training. You wouldn't trust a lawyer unless they'd actually qualified. But we're very happy to place people in positions of management who have no understanding of how to actually manage other people, especially at this really difficult time. And so I think that's why leaders in particular have to recognise their own well-being and its state, but also the well-being of their teams as well, and how to support them. And that well-being can cover such a wide range of issues, anything from fertility through to bereavement. If you look at the challenges that every one of us faces on a day-to-day basis just in our life, you can understand, how complex it must be. So People go through relationships issues, divorce, separation. They go through mental health, whether it's stress, depression, postnatal depression. They go through issues like menopause. They go through financial concerns. They go through concerns about their families, so their children, how their children are coping through all of this. And then equally, you've got the concern of the elderly right now, because they're very much on their own. And if you're a child with an elderly relative, or an adult with an elderly relative, you're going to be concerned about their well-being as well, and making sure that they're okay. And all of those things make up a human, but that human's got to go to work, and therefore it's part of that psychological contract between employer and employee that they have a duty. If they're expecting that person to work on behalf of a company, the company has a duty morally and ethically to look after that employee, to make sure that they are in the right frame of mind in order to work.
That list of things you were talking about there, from grief to divorce to separation to menopause, gosh, you must have a bundle of stuff on your desk every day. So how do you bring all that together then? I understand you have a well-being strategy. What's the purpose of that, Sarah Jane?
Okay, so a lot of companies have a lot of benefits, rewards, initiatives that they have put together. Some of them are sort of multi-layered over the years. Some cases they've just been a tick box exercise. In some cases they've been an HR manager's particular wish or foible that this comes on board. But actually, if you strip it all down and actually look at what is it that employees need, that is where you start to get to the basis of your wellbeing strategy. Now, a wellbeing strategy should be something that you undertake every single year, just as you do a business plan, looking at the well-being of your employees and mapping out the year to see what you can do when to support them. So these days, it's not just enough to have a salary. Nowadays, employees, especially Generation Z coming in, they expect to have mental health support. They expect to have medical insurance. They expect to have the support that you need, maternity leave, maternity pay, that kind of thing. So it's not just good enough anymore just to have a salary. You need to have, the different layers involved that will particularly help an individual or a range of individuals across your organization. Now, each organization is completely different. The demographic of, say, an IT company might be very different to, say, the demographic of a law firm, build-up of a law firm. You might have a particularly young workforce, or you might have a workforce that is particularly made up of working parents. So each company's wellbeing strategy is going to be very different. But it is really important that you don't just tick box and say, oh, I've got emergency childcare, oh, I've got the company car, oh, I've got the wine club or the gym membership. You actually have to look at, do those benefits really fit your company? Do they match with your culture and your values? So for example, if you are very keen on flexible working and have a very open policy towards working parents, emergency childcare doesn't always convey that idea. It often gives the impression that work comes first, and if your child is ill, you will still expect somebody to work, which is not. Does that fit right with your culture? Does that fit right with what your values are that you're trying to express to your employees? So you need to very much look at the age of your people, what they really need. Does it fit with your culture and your values? Does it fit with the current times? So coming out of lockdown now, for example, mental health of your child and parent is really important, because they will be although we're all delighted for them to be going back to school, don't get me wrong, there will be people really worried about it, especially the children. So that sort of thing is helping people back into work, giving them the psychological safety to go back to work. That's what you should be looking at for the next 2-3 months, for example. So yeah, a wellbeing strategy is really, really important. It's no good just having the fruit on a tree. You need to have the branches to hold up that fruit.
Okay. And I guess at the moment, first of all, I totally understand why culture and values is so important. And it's the moments of the truth when it has to be tested as to whether or not the actual strategy is aligned to the culture and values of the business. But I guess it has to be very fluid at the moment, because every week and every day almost we're faced with a new announcement or a new challenge or even a new variant. So how does that work with a strategy that is defined and then has to change from your perspective?
Well, I think strategy, just like a business plan, has to be looked at a quarterly basis.
Okay.
So in order to measure the output, how do you measure the output? Well, how do you measure the output of a business plan? You know, we all suddenly had to stand still back on March the 23rd last year, and our budgets all went completely out the window. So obviously you have to be flexible. So the key with having a good wellbeing strategy is that you review it on a quarterly basis, and you look at, you know, for example, at the moment everyone's working from home, so how can we support people as they're working from home? In the next quarter, people will be gradually starting to think about going back to work, but that's going to take a big mental shift. I keep going back to this phrase, psychological safety. People are going to want to know it's okay for them to be commuting in. They're going to want to know they're safe in the office. They're going to want to know that they have the flexibility, if they're not secure, to stay at home. And then obviously as the year progresses, we're hopefully getting back, back to normal, more to what we're used to. So it does have to be reviewed, I would say, once a quarter. It has to be a fairly flexible sort of situation. So if you're putting webinars into place, for example, they have to be, some of them can match up, like you have Mental Health Week or International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March, or you have Child Anxiety Month or whatever, then you can obviously plan for those events. But equally, you have to be fairly flexible to know, for example, that there may be, online holiday camps that you can put on for your children at the moment. Now, hopefully next year that's not going to be needed, but it's something that you can bend with the times.
Okay. Have you got anything? I know you've been doing a lot of talking, Sarah Jane. Has anything you wanted to sort of put back to me, but from a different perspective on employee wellbeing?
Well, I guess, given the work that you do in terms of sales and how you help people improve their sales position, what are you seeing at the moment in terms of the way employees are coping with this amongst the companies that you're working with?
Well, a lot of them are working as you are, alone and in their silos. And in the sales game, when you get an awful lot of rejection or rudeness or simply people unavailable, and the salesperson begins to feel quite intimidated or worried that they're not performing. So the best question is just, are you okay? And then the secondary question is this really true? Is there anything else you really want to talk about? And then just trying to work with those responses in a way that actually means something, as opposed to something that's just a veneer that's on the surface that doesn't actually resonate with the individual. And giving them the permission to know that there's 24 hours in a day, and it doesn't have to be done in the context of 9 to 5 or the traditional hours of work. As long as the job gets done, then that's the key, and allowing for flexibility in the normal day for the function to be carried out, as opposed to thinking it has to sit within these two particular silos of 9 till 5. It could be 7 till 3, or it could be a mixture of that, or it could be a sporadic pattern between when the dog needs walking or when the child is homeschooling. So it might be 4 hours one day and 12 hours the next, but across the 3 days, we've still got 24 hours that have been covered. So yeah. I think that's the key, to really understand that it doesn't have to be performed now at this minute, as long as it's done. And even if it's not, then as long as the employee is genuinely okay in the process, then that's, I think, is a key part of a salesperson's role.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Flexibility is massively key. The days when we used to work 9 to 5 just don't really exist anymore. Technology is such that now people can work around themselves, and some people may prefer to work late, some people may prefer to wake up early and do something different. I think employers need to realize that we live in a much different, everything is different now. To go back to exactly what it was before is just not going to happen, because people understand the flexibility that they have. They understand the technology that they have at their fingertips. They also understand just how important well-being really is, because we've come face to face with it in a really hard way over the last year. And the levels of mental illness or depression or stress across the whole country is absolutely massive. And I think people have realized that actually family and well-being is amazingly important to them, and being healthy and you know, healthy not only physically but mentally, it is something that they have to really strive for. I mean, we know that from the impact of COVID. So I think well-being is going to be something going forward that employers are really going to have to take advantage of. And actually, it's quite scary to know that only 44% of companies in the UK actually have a well-being strategy. And yet over 60% of companies recognise that well-being is something that they should be focusing on. Now, how do you measure that output? Because a lot of people kind of say, well, you know, it's just money wasted, so why should I bother? Well, the fact of the matter is that if you do employee engagement surveys and you look at the number of sick days, for example, you look at the level of absenteeism, you look at the output of somebody who may be working, you know, 13, 14-hour days, is that really sustainable? Well, the answer is no. So the way to measure it is start implementing, and they don't have to cost a lot of money. You know, webinars and fact sheets and information, all of those things provide a background for people to learn from and to measure themselves from. And then you can start building up. And at the end of the year, look back at those measurable outputs and say, well, how is that different from the year before? And I think companies will be really surprised that actually looking after the well-being of employees doesn't have to cost a lot, but can have quite a measurable ROI, you know, in the long term, because you won't lose so many people. You'll have a higher retention rate. Your attrition rate will drop. The productivity and performance and the creativity and collaboration within an organization will increase. And, you know, that's for the whole reason. And you asked me at the very beginning, why is well-being so important? Well, I think for those four reasons alone, people should be really seriously considering a well-being strategy. So performance, productivity, creativity, and collaboration.
Okay. And just in terms of, let's say it's this time next year and we are in some kind of blended or new work model that involves home and office, how can this carry on so that the return on investment can be something that is measurable and means something to the balance sheet and EBITDA and everything else, so that employee well-being is a constant, not just something that's a COVID-related activity?
No, it should continue throughout. It's not just for COVID. So going forward, it's very much looking at, you know, the dynamics and demographic of your workforce is going to change. The numbers are going to change. So you need to look at things beyond health insurance. So obviously measure your sick days, measure your absenteeism, measure your attrition rates, look at your training, for example, because every time you lose somebody either to illness, or mental or physical, or because they simply cannot sustain working with you anymore at the rate that they do, you're obviously paying for recruitment fees and for training that person. So that again is another cost. Take all of those things into consideration, and that will continue whether you're in a COVID situation or not. As you change, you need to carry out employee engagement surveys. So you need to talk to them and see how they need to do. You need to assess, for example, how many working parents you now have. Because funnily enough, your 20-somethings will become your 30-somethings, and your 30-somethings will have children, and your 40-somethings will then have teenagers, and so on and so forth. And so gradually you may not need any working parent benefits, but in time you may do. You may have a workforce that need to financially plan for their future, for their retirement. You know, so how do you help those people extricate themselves from the working life that they've been involved in for 30, 40 years? How do you recruit new people on board? Now, as I said, new people, Generation Z, now want a lot more emotional support, well-being support. And that doesn't just mean providing them with a table tennis table or a pool table, as in, you know, the IT companies do. It's helping them with mental health support. That sort of thing is how you measure it and how you continue. It's an evolving situation. As your company grows, so should your well-being strategy grow with you.
Okay. What do you think? A couple of questions here. First of all, I'll let you ponder this one. What do you think of things like Calm or Headspace, which actually encourages you to do more screen time when we're talking about needing to do less screen time? And then have you got any examples that you just think are fantastically brilliant examples of how employee well-being can bring some really added spice and benefits to a workplace. So a couple of questions there for you to think about. What about the headspace sort of calm aspect of too much screen time or reliance on screen time?
I think each person is different, and some people do like that kind of area. I mean, my personal thing is that you can't beat a really good walk in the sunshine. Now, my husband's view is that a walk is wasted, full stop, wasted time. So, you know, each person is completely different. Personally, I think we will have way too much screen time at the moment. You know, I think that will have an effect on our eyes and our brains, you know, as time goes on. But some people find calm or headspace or meditation, screen meditation, really helpful for them. And I think each person has their own way of coping with things. So what might work for one person, you know, might be very successful for others. So I'm not going to sort of criticize it, because I think each person needs their own way to chill out.
Yeah. And any examples of that you just think, oh, this is a couple of little nuggets here that without giving away all your secrets, that somebody could adopt to try to really demonstrate that they are a very employee-centric well-being or organization?
So one really good example is one of our clients, which is Enterprise. Now, Enterprise really put their employee wellbeing at the heart of what they do. We worked with them for 3 or 4 years now, and they have a really, their HR director, Leela Favraya, is really focused on looking after her community and views it as a community. So they have a community newsletter. They have a portal which has fact sheets and podcasts and videos and information on there, which is a first port of call for anybody who's looking for help with regards to any particular subject. So they are divided into financial, social, mental and physical. They also have access to childcare searches. They have access to a nursery, so a Google nursery search function. So their headquarters are in Egham, but from wherever they're coming or driving into Egham, they can find on this Google search function a nursery that is rated good or outstanding for them. So effectively any parent can be driving into work, drop their child off at nursery, and then on their way back out of work, they can pick them up on the way out. So it actually facilitates their working parents' lives as well. They are dedicated to D&I, you know, across the whole range. So they have had talks on LGBT parenting. They have had talks on, you know, helping people with elder care, with childcare, working life balance, you know, how to manage career and parenthood. They've really looked at who is working for them within their demographic and set up that really strong feeling of support and advice and help from a very basic level. And then on top of that, they've obviously got all their other benefits that they've had. Another fantastic company, for example, is L'Oreal. L'Oreal gives all their parents a free childcare search to enable them to come back to work with everything organized. And again, they have a community newsletter and a portal, and they really spend a lot of time on their communication, because communication is really key for well-being. The larger the company, the harder the communication internally. And I would say, you know, L'Oreal and Enterprise have been clients with us for a very long time, and their communication is really key at communicating to their employees how important well-being is. Okay,
one last one, little bit naughty of me. What really gets your goat up with regard to employee well-being that you just think, oh, that really frustrates me?
Tick box exercises.
Okay, all right. What do you mean?
Well, people who literally just kind of go, oh, I've done that tick, and move on. They don't really sort of think about it. And it's kind of like, oh, well, I've got that already, so I don't need to talk to you. And it's a bit like, yes, you might have got it, but actually, is it really working for you? You know, it might have been put in place 2-3 years ago, but have you actually had value for money? Is it being used? Because I bet you, like 9 times out of 10, either your employees don't know about it, they're not using it, they're abusing it, or frankly, it's null and void because there's just no point to it, because nobody, it doesn't fit with people and what their interests are. So yeah, I would probably say the most annoying thing to me is people who kind of go, yeah, we've got that, thanks and bye, rather than really kind of thinking about, what is it that their employees are looking for? How can they really help them? And if at that point people say, no, it's okay, we've got it covered, then at least I know it's been a measured response, rather than no, we've ticked the box, we can move on, we don't need to do that anymore.
Very good. Okay, well, I'm at the end of all my questions. Anything else from you, Sarah Jane, before we put your contact details up?
No, I think that's anything. I just really stress to people right now that well-being is something that people should really take consideration of, because it's the one way we will come out of this lockdown a more successful and a much happier, more balanced workforce.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah Jane, you have really given me some things to think about. So I'm sure other people have as well. So if they want to go and find you, this is where you are. sj.butler@youremployeewellbeing.co.uk for those in the podcast. Sarah Jane's mobile is 07812242388. And the website is youremployeewellbeing.co.uk. And you can find Sarah Jane on LinkedIn with Sarah-Jane-Butler. Great to see you. You do some great things, Sarah Jane. Keep it up, and let's keep all those employees safe and well.
Thanks so much, Chris. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.